I think one of the most important things to note is that we put the first Indigenous woman on the cover of Vogue in the world. And I think that is important because culturally, we're a society that very much looks outwards. We like things that come from the US. So beauty standards were always European beauty standards. It was always a foreign model that did better. It was always a blonde actress that was the leading protagonist in a movie. It was never an Indigenous woman. And I feel like in 2019, when Alfonso Cuarón put Yalitza as a leading woman, one of the editors pitched it to me and I said, oh, I can't put Yalitza on the cover. No one knows who she is. And I saw the movie and I was like, no, we absolutely have to do this. And I went to New York and I was speaking to another editor that said to me, oh, you never put her on the cover. I was taken aback and I said, why is she saying that? And I knew why she was saying it. She was a brown Indigenous woman. And I was like, you know what? I need to put her on the cover after this comment. And it changed the way we covered fashion, the way Vogue was perceived, the way that the fashion industry and beauty industry in Mexico hired people to be their spokespeople.
I'm Jill Demling, and welcome to Going Rogue. Today's guest is Karla Martínez de Salas. Karla started as a fashion assistant at American Vogue in 2002 and has been climbing magazine mastheads ever since. She now resides at the top of Twin Peaks as the editor-in-chief of Vogue Mexico and Vogue Latin America. Her 2016 appointment was a full-circle moment for Karla. Her Latin roots have always been an important part of her life, and now celebrating her culture is part of her job. Along with raising 9-year-old twins, that is. Let's welcome Karla to Going Rogue. Hi, Karla.
Hi, Jill.
It looks very sunny there. I'm jealous. It's raining here.
So sunny. I guess you can blame global warming, but it's never used to be this warm. It's like 85 degrees.
Oh my God.
It's almost too warm, if that's possible. There's no central air because it never used to be so hot or cold. And now it's getting a little more extreme.
Oh, yay. Well, I just introduced you before coming on as the editor-in-chief of both Vogue Mexico and Vogue Latin America. For those listeners who don't know, can you talk about the difference between the two magazines and their readership and how you ensure both magazines have a distinct voice and point of view?
Yes, well, I would love to explain that because a lot of people have no idea that we actually produce 2 magazines per month out of Mexico. So Mexico is just distributed to, obviously, Mexico, and Latin America is distributed in Central America. So Guatemala, Panama, El Salvador, Nicaragua, et cetera, Dominican Republic, and obviously Latin America, except for Brazil because of language reasons. And I wish I could tell you that the content is completely different, but it's not that different because of budget reasons. It's 2 magazines with 1 budget that we operate on. Sometimes if we have the opportunity to do a second cover for Latin America, we'll do that. We have that in June, but for example, in May, we have a big cover. And so we'll pool all our resources to shoot like one big celebrity. And
they're global celebrities that you're putting on the cover.
Exactly. We change also language because the way you say things in Argentina differs from the way you say things in Mexico. So we refer to this kind of a Spanish, you could say like language Bible, and we tweak certain words. Then you also have to remember that they're going into fall.
Right.
Summer. I saw an accessory story that the team had done, and it had like a black leather jacket. And I was like, this will work for Latin America, but in Mexico, no one's wearing a leather jacket right now because it's hot. So even though northern Mexico has a cold front, so we do our best to tweak certain things. But I like to think that the readers in Mexico love to know what's going on in Latin America. And if there's a relevant writer, like someone like this Argentinian woman, Mariana Enriquez, whose actually books have been bestsellers in English, they want to read about that in Mexico and vice versa. So
for Vogue.com in America, I remember the French girl was what everyone wanted over here. The most traffic was on their French girl. What does the French girl wear? What does people do want to know what's out there too? But that's interesting because I didn't even know at first if it was two separate magazines. So I've heard you speak about it, and I thought it was important if I didn't know that
Yeah, it's
others
great to
might.
clarify because I have to tell you, when I first started going to Europe, other editors would say, "What do you mean you do two magazines?" I'm like, "Yeah, we have two different closes. We have a Mexico close, and then we have a Latin America close." And it's really interesting to work in that way and having to think of as an entire region and
I
not
know.
just one country, right?
And
So that
Brazil has its own Vogue, right?
Brazil has its own because they speak Portuguese.
Right.
It's also interesting to see that a lot of Mexican, like soap operas, right? That's a big category that people watch Mexican soap operas in Brazil, and they're hugely popular. Like Thalia, the singer, has a huge fan base in Brazil. And also, strangely, like in Turkey. I think living in the US and being in US based magazines where you're only thinking about like the United States, oftentimes you don't realize the big global movements going around. And I feel like soap operas were obviously one of them.
Hmm.
And how like the Latin American soap opera went around the world before streaming platforms, you know.
Right. Yeah. And then there's those shows like, is it Elite? There's those other big
Yes,
Netflix shows. And now we
yes,
see how the Korean shows are
absolutely.
coming. So
Yeah. And
it's
how
been
big all the
nice.
K-pop stars are. I mean, I'm sure you see that with the different magazines that you're booking. And a lot of those girls are oftentimes more popular than like Taylor Swift.
Absolutely.
And it's really interesting to see how that phenomena happened like in the past couple of years, right? And I always say that Netflix, Prime, Hulu, Apple TV really changed kind
Hmm.
of the global celebrities, right? Like, what
Absolutely.
was it, Squid Games that no one
Yes.
imagined? But now Netflix announced in early January that they were investing millions of dollars in producing in Mexico and Latin America.
Oh,
So that's
wow.
really interesting. And I feel like a lot of those shows are going global and vice versa. And the subject of a lot of conversation, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I always think it's important for our listeners to hear about my guest's career journey starting from the beginning, because childhood can kind of make or break someone's dreams, and having a family that's supportive of a child's dream. I read this great quote from you about growing up in Texas. You say, I grew up in Texas and my mom always used to get Hola magazine from Mexico. I always thought that it was interesting to see women and the power of what they were wearing. I think clothing really changes women. It can be very transformational. It's so funny though, because I was in Ola once when we did the Cayetano Rivera shoot with in Madrid with Penelope because we got him out of the hospital. But it's clear from reading this and knowing you that you had an interest in fashion and journalism at a young age. Can you tell us more about growing up in El Paso with immigrant parents and how that shaped who you are today as a person and a Vogue editor?
I was actually listening to another podcast this morning, and they were asking Alison Lonis from Net-a-Porter how she started fashion and how she became interested in fashion. And obviously, I grew up in El Paso, which is not known to be a fashion capital. It's a great place to live. I now appreciate it so much more than when I was living there. You know, I think when we're young and you want to live in the city with like the Universal Studios,
Right.
the Planet Hollywood, and Hard Rock, you know, all those like fun things, what you thought was like the center of the universe, and
Hmm.
like a big,
Disney World.
yeah, exactly. And I think El Paso, it's a really bicultural city. It's on the border. It's very different from the rest of Texas just because Texas is such a big state that it takes the same time to get from Houston to El Paso that it takes from El Paso to Los Angeles. So we're kind
Wow.
of more kind of Western, like we're right next to New Mexico. We have New Mexico, Mexico, Texas, like this triangle. And my mom used to, you know, they moved to the US from Mexico in the 70s for my dad to go to school and be a doctor and, well, do his residency actually. And my mom really missed home. I remember when we moved to El Paso, she was so excited that she would be able to go to Mexico and come back, and she could go to Mexico and buy magazines and buy her Ola, buy her
Yeah.
Vanidades. which was kind of like a good housekeeping, you could say, but very stylish, what women wore. And my mom used to bring them home and I used to devour them. And they had very famous fashion critics too. And I just, I remember looking at those magazines and really thinking, this is what I want to do, but I don't know how to go into this world. I had no idea. I don't know if you feel this, but growing up in Boston, maybe because you're closer to New York, you maybe understood all the different areas of fashion you could work in. And I just thought fashion designer, own a clothing store. I didn't think
Right.
it was this whole world.
Yeah,
So
I didn't even think about it, to be honest. And
yeah,
it's funny because I kind of fell into it, but then talking with someone like Brian Coates, since he was 6 years old in a small town in North Carolina, he'd watch this famous fashion critic who was on television. And that was his thing. It wasn't the Smurfs, it was a
yeah,
fashion critic. So some people just see something, they're exposed to something because you might not have found it otherwise. And you cling on because it piques an interest in you that maybe wouldn't have
absolutely.
if it wasn't a magazine sitting there that you were
Right.
just like devouring.
I think that was magazines for me. And my mom wasn't a big clothes horse. There were four of us. She certainly still gawks at like when she sees like the price of clothes and she's like, I can't believe you bought that. Or Karla, did that really cost that? It's still, I don't know where I came from in that sense because my mom is very like frugal and responsible and like never buys anything that's not on sale. And she's always had sticker shock, but she always was well dressed and put a lot of importance and emphasis on what she
Yeah.
wore. And she wanted to look good. And I think I was really inspired by that.
So
And
she didn't wear all black like the editors. I'm sure she had
no,
colorful, the
no, black was for
Mexican.
funerals, especially in Latin America. You were not wearing all black. That was what you wore to a funeral. I would love it when she wore these design dresses by Diane Gray. I can't remember. I need to go through her closet and get back to you on that. They
Yeah.
were these like beautiful, colorful dresses, like very 80s, that were silk and had the pleated skirt, and they were quite expensive. And I remember the first one she bought and how excited she was to buy one. And
Wow.
I think she always knew that I liked fashion and she wasn't quite sure how I would
Make a career out of it.
make a career out of it. And I went to University of Arizona. And funny enough, I just saw my friend Loretta, who was the girl who actually sparked my interest in going to New York for an internship. Her mom worked at like the clothing store in El Paso. So she had always had great clothes. In high school, it was interesting because I found that for as non-fashiony as El Paso was, there was like a cool kind of underground music scene. And you had the girls that would come to high school from Juarez, Mexico, that were really fashion forward. So when I started like looking into schools, I didn't even occur to me. And being like a child of immigrant parents, college applications, SATs, like that was not their thing. My mom was like, I have no idea how to help you. Like
Right.
I had an older sister who also really loved clothes too and fashion. And we were very into that early. It was like the Prada nylon bag, the
Oh,
beginning of the Prada
yes.
nylon bag. And so my sister went to University of Arizona and then she actually transferred back home 2 years later, but she was like, I think you'll like it there. And I was like, okay. So I remember I applied to University of Arizona, Tulane, and SMU. And I didn't get into Tulane and I got into SMU and I got into University of
They're
Arizona.
so very different.
So different. I don't know what my selection process was, but and my dad was like, if you go to SMU, you're not taking a car because it's an expensive school. And I was like, I'm not going there without a car.
Yeah.
So I chose University of Arizona. My friend Loretta, who I just told you about, was also going there. So I didn't know anyone. And she was the one with like, we're going to live here. She set it out for me. And
Yeah.
it was like 4 hours away, but it was like worlds away. It was like girls from Los Angeles, New York, Dallas, that
Well, Texas is a very unique place. I
they,
feel like of all the states, I've only been there once, but I would think anywhere you went would be very different in a way.
yes. And I studied marketing. I kind of chose something that was in business, but
Right.
not finance or accounting or anything like that. And I remember like my sophomore year, my friend Loretta saying, I'm going to intern at Nicole Miller in New York. And I was like, what? And I was so jealous. She's like, my mom helped me get the internship. I was going to ask her, my dad was a doctor.
Yeah.
So I started looking through magazines and I called up AFA, it's like a showroom, and someone picked up the phone. And by literally the good grace of God, the girl was like, I'm from Tucson too. And
Oh my God.
of course we take interns. And
That was bold though.
yeah,
And to
it
be
was
able
like
to
pick
do
up the
that.
phone and she's like, can you come for an interview? And it was not like Tucson, New York was not what it is now. Don't you feel like the world has gotten so much smaller than?
Yes.
And I flew up and my mom was like, oh my God, she asked like her friend's daughter if I could stay with her. I mean, it
Wait,
was,
so what year were you? Were
I
you a
think that was like,
senior or you were,
no, I was a sophomore. So it must have been like 93.
and it was for a summer internship?
It was for a summer internship.
Oh
And I
God.
lived with my other best friend who was going to UT Austin. And we lived on like 80th Street between Park and Madison on this like super fancy block, but in this like rundown,
Yes,
like
I did
lights
that.
everywhere.
Yeah, my friends and I would come to New York over the summers. We had a railroad flat that wasn't even really a one bedroom, one little bathroom. And then we had two air mattresses. One was a double that I shared with one friend. It was four of us in a one bedroom because it was so expensive, remember? And that was Upper East Side.
Oh my God, it was so expensive. This was like a studio. It was a really charming building, but the apartments had not been renovated in years.
Right.
It was great. It was the first time I saw kind of and learned about the industry. This woman, Michelle Stein, worked there. She was the president, and I think she just retired like 2 years ago. I'm still very much in touch with her. And I remember going to get her dry cleaning. And I came back and she's like, why do you have my dry cleaning? This like big New York, tall redhead, impeccably dressed. And I said, because your assistant asked me to get it. And she said, it's not what you came here to do.
Wow.
So that summer I was in sales and I learned like all about sales and stores and market. And it was, then I discovered that's not what I wanted to do. Um, and a W editor came in and they said, Karla, no one's in PR today. Can you help her? And I helped her. And I was like, someone has this job. Someone comes to
Yeah.
pick out clothes. And she's like, oh, yeah, we do take interns. And I'm like, I have to do this next summer. So I called W when time came. And this woman, Stella Angelakos, picked up the phone and she's like, can you come and meet with me? I was so nervous. And then Stella went to Condé Nast. So we kept in touch. And I went back to school, graduated, and moved to Paris just because I really wanted to learn French. And I wasn't able to go to Paris on my junior year abroad because my dad was like, it's not the right time. It's expensive and I don't want to pay for that right now. And so I begged them to let me move after
You
college.
were fearless. I never
I was
knew how
fearless.
fearless.
Yeah, I have to say I was very persistent.
Do you look back and can you recognize that girl that had the balls to do all of this?
Yes, I have to say, considering that my mom was from like a very small town and not what you would call like worldly or cosmopolitan. And, she met my dad and they got married and they moved to the US like a few months after they got married. And she was very, sheltered growing up. She was from a very small town. So yeah, I think I was very fearless. I was very determined. And
Yeah.
once I didn't know at first how to break in, but then once I broke in, I was like, I have to do this. And I'm very lucky that my parents allowed this craziness. And I was just thinking, I wish I had had college jobs. I never did that. I don't know if you did, but I feel like it
No.
taught me a little bit more about fiscal responsibility in a way.
Right. But what did they think about you graduating and saying, no, I am not going to go into this line. I don't know what I'm going to do, but it's going to be in fashion and I need to figure it out. It'll be trial and error and bye guys. And they're like, okay, we just put you through college and do you have a plan? And you seem like you knew exactly what you wanted to do and you weren't worried about getting it.
No, I was not. Once I realized I can make a career out of this, I'm going for it.
Yeah. Did you know someone in Paris when you
Not really.
arrived?
My friend Megan Walsh, who I think you met a couple times because she used to work for Craig McDean.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, she was his studio manager. And she said to me, Karla, I know one person. She was working at LA Models at the time. And she said, I'm going to connect you with someone at IMG. And IMG was not this humongous agency that it is now. And I remember going in to meet with them and saying, oh, I want to be an intern. And they're like, do you speak French? And I was like, yes. I did not speak French. I remember
You're like, I speak Spanish.
yeah, I had taken French in college just to kind of prepare myself.
Right.
And I didn't even know how to pick up the phone. And they're like, I don't think you speak French. I have like basic understanding. A friend of mine who was Mexican, she was like, listen, my mom has this friend. She married a Mexican. She's French. She's going to teach you what you need to know. And literally, and I would go to her house for a month straight. And she was like, this is how you answer the phone. She taught me like basic
Wow.
French for dummies to be able to like pick up the phone, put someone on hold, like dumb things.
Yes.
It was trial and error. And I was there for 3 months. And then my dad was like, okay, ready to come home and find a job? And I was like, not yet. And I said, I actually found another internship at Hearst magazines and they pay a little better. So he's like, if you find a less expensive apartment, you can stay. And so I moved in with a friend. This woman rented a room to students. I lived there from January to June and worked at Hearst magazines, which was really great because it was when they had Harper's, House Beautiful, Cosmo, Town and Country.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And we were still send someone on the Concord with closed days. So
Exactly.
Kate Betts had just started at Bazaar. So it was that transformation.
Yeah, because that's when I got promoted when Kate left because she took Dita with her.
Got it.
That's when I was promoted to entertainment editor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was there for 6 months. It was really interesting and fascinating. There I learned what the editors do when they come to Europe, the pictures of the collections, pre-style.com and pre the big kind of transformation to looking at everything online. And that was amazing because I got to work with so many different editors, like Samira was an editor.
And you always speak a lot about how much you learned starting at the bottom and all of these different internships. A lot of people would be like, I'm more qualified or this or that. But you talk about how important that was. And you're talking about it now, how much you learned at each place. You really took it in.
I was always so grateful because I didn't have any of that growing up. And I feel like no one put me in any sort of position in front of anyone. I put myself
right.
And I made sure that all of the people that I met, not in a kind of social climbing way, but I just made sure that I kept in touch with them because I knew that they worked in the industry and
that's smart.
That later then I might come across one of them. And so then I moved to New York and I emailed Stella Angelakos, who's now at Condé Nast because Condé Nast has bought women's wear and W.
Right.
And she says to me, I have a junior editor position at Mademoiselle, but then there's also a closet position available at Vogue. And I went to both and I remember meeting Meredith and she was like, who is your favorite stylist? I don't think I've ever said this out loud. And I think I said like Brana Wolf or something because I had just worked with Brana at Harper's. And
so you didn't say
the job. I didn't say Grace, who was obviously one of my favorite stylists and someone I really looked up. I had just moved and worked with Brana and Melanie and thought all these women were amazing. And so I did not get that job. I think someone else got it. I can't remember if it was, who was it? Brian? No, well, Brian's been there forever. And I think
Brian was there. I just had him on and he started there in 1996 and then he went to GQ. So maybe it was that time period.
Yeah. And I think another girl got that job. And so I took the job at Mademoiselle. And I remember Bonnie Morrison was the editor-in-chief, Mandy's assistant. And she always says this funny story. She's like, you would always come over and talk to me. And I'd be like,
I just saw her last night.
She used to be like, Karla, stop talking to me. And I like somehow won her over. And
She's a tough one.
she's a
But I
tough
got a
one.
text today that seeing me last night was the highlight of her week. And I took that as a major win.
Exactly. I know she was tough. I was there very briefly and they called me to see if I was interested in a more senior position and I took it. And I was there for like a year and a half during 9/11 and I was promoted to be Nina Garcia's assistant.
Wow.
And so I worked for Nina. I was probably a terrible assistant. You had to do her schedule
I know.
and
I know what it's
and
like to be.
that was really stressful and not fun, but it was obviously an amazing learning experience. And then my friend Gareen Zarunian called me and was like, listen, they're looking for someone at Vogue. I don't know if you're going to get the job. It's to work for Wendy Hirschberg. She's been through like 3 assistants and she really needs someone good. And I went and I really hit it off with Wendy. And she was like, I want you to meet Grace. So then I went back and met Grace and it was obviously the most amazing experience. And she was wearing all black and
Of course.
she asked me like a trillion questions, kind of gauge how dedicated I would be to working at Vogue and working for her.
Yeah, putting her as first, like
Exactly.
making sure you knew that Grace was priority.
Yes. And then I got a call back and they said to me, you need to meet, obviously everyone has to meet Anna. First question is, what are you going to wear? And I think I went to Bergdorf Goodman and spent money I didn't have and bought like an Olivier Teskin skirt, who was like, had his own brand at the time, a black skirt, I still have it, and a like kind of rust colored turtleneck. Someone said, oh, no,
Color.
black. And these Pierre Hardy kitten heels that I had bought in Paris at Maria Luisa. And my friend loaned me her coat, like my roommate. And I went in and I think it went well. I think that's why I got the job.
Yes.
And I remember Wendy showing me my resume and it said, Wendy, please see me, AW.
Oh my God, that is funny. Yeah, I remember what I wore because I had met with Bucky Keaty, who is HR, and all I had, because I had come from LA, was this BCBG suit and Nine West heels. But this was 1998. So that was my only interview suit type thing. So I
Well,
wore that. Yeah.
suits were not a thing.
No.
Like now I go to things, give a talk at a college or high school, and people are wearing like a suit. I did not have a suit jacket for a
I didn't.
long
Yeah.
time.
This was the one outfit I had. So I wore it to meet Bucky. And then I had actually accepted a job with Todd Oldham and had called to tell Bucky that, I didn't need to meet Anna. And she said, you're coming to meet Anna. So on Friday, when she called to say Anna was available at 9 and to get ready, I tried to say, no, I'm going with Todd Oldham. She's like, get dressed and wear some skinny heels. And I was like, what? Skinny heels? Like
Yeah, like
these are
what did
really nice Nine West. So I wore the
yeah.
same thing to
I
Anna.
I remember I wore the Theory pants. Remember those kind of nylon? That was like
Yeah, of
a nice
course.
thing I had. And
Yes.
I don't want to age us, but Zara was not a thing. And or any of the,
No, it's Theory and BCBG.
yeah. And
That
like
was
Gap didn't have
nope. And of course, my suit was black. I had no idea at the time.
yeah.
I didn't know who Anna was. So when I went in, I was like, hey, what's up?
It's probably better in a way, I think.
Yeah. It's so funny how opposite we are in the lead up because while I did have someone that set up that first HR interview, Brian Lord, who was one of my bosses at the time in LA, his new sister-in-law, Crystal Moffat Lord, who made the introduction, but I still had no idea from that meeting I was going to be starting for Anna Wintour 3 days later. But then I was there for 20 years. And even just before your first job, you had so much experience.
Yeah. I was at Vogue, I think, for 4 or 5 years. And it was obviously an amazing experience. I remember the first time I saw you, you had your signature look, the bangs, the shoulder length hair with your mini skirts tight, tall boots. Sometimes it was another flat. I always was like, why can't I find a uniform like this? I'm like, because I'm not tall and skinny.
I literally would ask the younger designers. I try to get some free stuff from them, but I'd get free screeners. I wasn't in
Yeah,
the fashion
exactly.
department, so I really did try to keep it simple and mix in maybe one high piece. And that's
Yeah,
why I
it's
live
not
in Zara
easy.
right now,
Yeah, exactly. Was Meredith there already when you were there?
She came after me, but she came when I was still Anna's assistant. I believe she came from the ad side, but I didn't even know she was there, having gone to high school with her. My
Right.
first day at 350 Madison, she was in the elevator and she asked me, "What are you doing in my elevator?" And I said, "I'm starting as Anna Wintour's first assistant." And it was just so crazy. It was only a year and a half since we graduated college.
That's amazing. We could talk about this for hours.
Yeah, but that was an intense position you had
Yeah.
because as Wendy's assistant, you're helping her, but you're also in charge of helping
Yeah.
all the
I would like to
editors.
say it was probably the best master school in diplomacy one could ever have.
And you talk about diplomacy being a big thing for you and
Yeah.
one of the skills that has brought you a lot of success.
And again, I was so excited to be there. I think I started like on January 2002. And there was a girl, Erin Dean, who sat next to me. There were two assistants, which it's always makes things hard because it's
Yep.
like managing your boss plus managing each other's emotions. And
Yes.
who's the favorite and who's not the favorite. And who
Yes.
gets coffee and crazy things that I think people don't talk about when you're starting out.
Thank God mine was pretty clear that the junior did the coffee runs, did the dry cleaning,
Yeah.
waited later for the book. She got in at 6:30. I got in at 6:45 a.m. I mean, that place was intense.
Yeah, I know. Now that I hear people complaining about like, why do we have to come in 3 days a week? I'm like, you do not even know.
No.
I mean,
The only time I didn't get a phone call from Anna when I was assistant for sure, but even through the rest of the 18 and a half years was on Christmas Day. Even while I was about to go into surgery, I booked a cover, being rolled in for foot surgery.
yeah, I think that when I hear people complain about that, and then when people are like, oh, New York is the most amazing city. I work from home and I go get my coffee. I'm like, you obviously did not make $2,000 a month, have to pay your rent, have to be at the office at 8 a.m., no matter where you lived.
Oh,
And
yeah. You know what I used to do when I was Anna's assistant? We'd have money for lunch. So I'd get my $10 for lunch.
yeah, remember
And
the
then,
card? It was on the,
yes. And then I could have as much coffee as I wanted. So what I would do was my trick. The coffee place near 350 Madison had smoothies. So I'd get the smoothies there, and that would be expensed as coffee. Then during lunch, I would get like a hoagie sandwich, cut it in half, eat half for lunch and the other half for dinner
yeah,
because we had no money.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I remember when they were like, you can expense your lunch. I'm like, but
Yeah,
that meant that almost dinner too, because we were there working late. And
exactly.
like Meredith and Lauren Santo Domingo were two desks down. And it was great. At that time, Grace was obviously full time. Tawny was the fashion director. Elisa Santisi was the style director. Camilla Nickerson she was there all the time.
Mm-hmm.
We would call in clothing for all the shoots. And it was, oh, Phyllis, what am I talking? Phyllis was the
Yeah.
executive style director. And I always say that they were all tough in different ways. And you had to really learn how to make sure that all of them felt like they had your undivided attention all the time.
Well, tell us about the different ways too.
For example, Grace was obviously I would work with whoever her assistant was on making sure that all the looks were there and just the way she laid things out. And the one thing I have to say I loved about Phyllis's office was next to Virginia.
Yep.
So she was always speaking to us. And I'll never forget. And this was like first month, like I learned quick. She was shooting a plus size model with Helmut Newton. I think it was like one of his last shoots. And she had said, nothing's going to fit her. So we need to get some extra sizes, but I'm going to call in some runway looks. So I called in all the runway looks. We got her extras. I think Meredith was working on the extras from like the.
Oh, yeah, because she had like lingerie too and all of the.
And I remember Hermes could only confirm 2 looks. And the PR girl said to me, this look is very small, so I'm not going to send it and it's not available. So I tell Phyllis, this look, I don't think will fit. your model. So we're not going to get it and it's not available. And she said, how do you know it's not going to fit her? And I said, well, because we've seen the sizes. And she's like, I still want to see. And from that moment on, I said, she's right. We need to get it in and we need to see if it works on the fit model. And from then on, I said, you're right. I need to work really hard to get it for you. And it's kind of like, don't take no for an answer.
Yes.
I think from then on, we had a really good rapport because I always, it didn't matter if it was a 2-page story or an 18-page story. I think it's so interesting to see how much I learned about the process of taking a picture. And it's not just a picture, and certainly not when you're working with any photographer. And the way that she worked with Mr. Penn and
Yes.
the way that she worked with Helmut Newton were so fascinating. And then Stephen Klein. And I thought it was interesting. Elisa Santisi did accessories, and the way her approach to styling was so different than Tawny's, for example. And Tawny was
Well,
doing.
Tawny needed a lot of clothes too.
Yeah.
Editing would happen on set. There'd be racks and racks and racks.
And their approach was always so different. And I learned how to, say Grace might like this or Grace might appreciate this. And it was just such a dynamic time, I think, in fashion.
Any other stories like the Phyllis one? I imagine you're working on multiple stories and sometimes you can't get a piece unless maybe you can. But Brian Coates says the same thing, that no was not an option, that he learned that you do not get off the phone with the PR person until they say yes.
I remember PR people coming to our office and saying, I need to physically take this from you because I have to go to another shoot. And I used to be like, Grace is working with it. And I remember I used to love working with the other stylist assistant, and they would call me and say, Karla, can you help us? And Virginia would like, Karla, if you want to sneak out that dress for the weekend, fine, but it better be here on Monday at 8 a.m. I remember sharing looks with like Marie Amelie or her assistants. And I remember once, like literally Friday, 5 p.m., Labor Day weekend, Grace is shooting Halle Berry in Los Angeles.
Yes, I was on that shoot.
Yes. With the brown dress that she wore. And she had this Gucci dress. And the girl from Gucci was like, listen, Sarah Jane Hoare needs it for Vanity Fair. Karla, she's going to call you. And we somehow made it happen to share the look. And like, I used to be like, Grace, Sarah Jane wants this. And she'd look at me as if I had just murdered 5 cats. And we would figure out a way to make it happen. So that's why I was saying it was like a lot of diplomacy, a lot of working on things together and making.
And between the editors, though, I've heard Grace say, someone took that off my rack, or it's more likely Tawny saying, someone took this off my rack before one of the run-throughs. A run-through, if anyone doesn't know, is when the editor is going into Anna Wintour's office, editor-in-chief, and showing the racks of clothes. They go through each look for a sitting or a photo shoot that's happening likely the next week. And right before a run-through, I think there can be the taking of looks off other racks that are nearby or lined up, ready to go into Anna's office. But
I know it was the whole, and then we need it for the run through. Then what happened after the run through was like, if they had a celebrity or maybe they had a fit model, who I think a lot of times Lauren Santo Domingo going into Anna's office wearing Versace couture dress, as in the case of like being Nicole Kidman's body double. Or once when I think Phyllis asked Lauren to try on like a latex for a Stephen Klein shoot, and Lauren was like, oh my God, I got so claustrophobic, the poor thing. I think it took her like an hour to get out of that, to recover from that trauma of putting on a latex suit. I think there was so much that you learned about the process of what goes into a picture that there's no way you were learning that anywhere else. I think.
Right. And you're also learning by the selection of looks, especially for a Mr. Penn or Helmut Newton, what the shape of the model is going to be, what is needed, a skirt that can actually move this way. Is it something that needs to be flowy because it's going to be a wind machine? Is it something she's going to be contorted? That all these little things that they're
There's going to
thinking
be an
about.
exploding car in the back.
Yes, I know that picture so well. Well, I have remembered on other shoots, we've got to shoot this look first because we have someone waiting. And
Yeah,
also
we have to get it back.
the photographer doesn't care about that. So
No,
it's also getting the photographer to understand that we do have to shoot this out of order because someone's standing right there. You see that
right, waiting
person.
for it.
Yes.
Yeah. And then you would say, I worked so hard and that didn't get shot, or I
Oh,
promise.
y-
You know,
yes.
a friend of mine, this was like before Instagram days, and Grace really wanted this Comme des Garçons look that I think I like messed up and put the wrong number, which is like your worst nightmare, right? Like a typo of the wrong number. And my friend happened to be in Japan. I sent out an email saying, is anyone in Tokyo? And I think a friend of mine's girlfriend was in Tokyo and she brought back a Comme des Garçons look for Grace. Like we were always asking people, is anyone flying back from Paris? Is anyone doing? I mean, we did so much, I have to say. So when that look got shot and it came out, you were so happy.
Oh my God, that is so incredible. I know I always thought about that part of the office. It was always chaos, like just stress. I could see all the assistants in their faces, and it really felt like we were doing brain surgery. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
exactly. And how important it was.
So then what did you do from there, and why did you leave that
Well,
position?
from there, I remember Virginia had arrived and I applied to be the accessories director and I didn't get the job. And I remember being really disappointed. And, um,
Yeah, I
you know,
think that's important to talk about because
yeah,
dealing with rejection is super important for everyone out there because it's bound to happen. You will be
yeah, it's
rejected.
bound to happen.
It's bound to happen.
And
And what you do next is more important than that
exactly. And
job.
I remember I really was so grateful to Virginia that she even considered me for the job. And I think I thought at the time I was also too junior, and you project that, I think,
Mm,
sometimes.
mhm.
I um I remember going to meet with Anna and I didn't get the job and no one ever told me I wasn't getting the job, but I remember Michelle Sanders saying, "Well, you haven't heard, so you didn't get the job."
Right. And
And
that's important what you just said. I just want to highlight it that if you project any sort of insecurity, especially with Anna, she picks up on that. So that is important to really to go in there and if there's any way in your mind to picture you doing that job. It could be that you weren't and that everything led you back to where you're supposed to be. Listen,
exactly,
you can't
exactly.
change anything of what
Yeah.
happened to you because you're at the top right now.
Right.
So,
So then I said, okay, I want to get a different experience because I want to understand accessories more. And so a position opened up with Elisa. And I remember I went to work for Elisa and I became an associate. And in that position, I also did a few sittings around the country, which were really interesting. And I learned a lot from Elisa because she had such impeccable taste and,
mhm.
accessories are such a big category. And I remember how to put a budget together because we were also producing shoots. So we had so much money.
I feel like she would have been a very good boss because I feel like her assistants really meant a lot to her as far as being involved in shoots. I don't know. I just felt like she really relied on her
Yeah.
assistants, their
And also,
opinions and everything.
I thought it was interesting also working in those roles because you produce the shoots and you learn so much in that way because this is how much you have, this is how much you need. We had a lot, but still
Back
things
then.
start to add up. Yeah, back then. So I worked for her and then Gareen Zarunian called me, here she comes again, and was like, do you know Stefano Tonki? And I said, no. And she said, he is starting at T and it is after Amy Spindler had died. And they're looking for a market director. And I was like, oh, a
Wow.
director, what? And I went to the interview and it kind of went ish well with Stefano. I remember I wore this like Balenciaga by Nicolas Gisquier outfit that I had gotten on super sale at Bergdorf's. And then I met with Ann Christensen, who worked for Grace. So that was already a shoe in a way. And I think they offered the job to someone else and they didn't take it because at the end of the summer, they called me to offer me the job. And that was really interesting because I was coming from Vogue. I remember
Oh my God.
my first day, we had a big kind of breakfast in the conference room with, at the time, Arthur Salzberger. Yeah. And Michael Barbaro from The Daily had just started that day. He was on the Metro desk. I'll never
Oh,
forget it.
wow.
And we became friends. And it was another world. It was as if they spoke another language. And don't get me wrong, I mean, Vogue is not just a fashion magazine. We all know that. But I was so in my fashion market bubble that,
Right.
and it was just interesting to hear what they were talking about. And then I got into the job at the New York Times Style magazine, and Stefano and all of them just knew about everything that I did not know about: art, design,
Yes.
travel, food. And so that was a huge learning experience. I started in September. I went to the European shows with them. I was so nervous just to be in Europe. I don't think they called it that then, like they say, imposter syndrome. Like, what am I
Mhm.
here? Am I senior enough? And I remember there was a one PR girl that I won't mention her name, but she said that I was too junior to get the discount at Prada at the time. And I was like,
It's like, look at the title on my
I
business
am
card.
the market director, but I was really young to be a market director. And I didn't have any friends that were in that level.
Well, I talk about this with everyone that no one retires, especially at Vogue. So you almost had to leave to even move up the ladder, even by title, let
I knew I
alone by
wasn't moving up
salary.
the ladder.
Yeah.
I knew it wasn't going to happen. I remember not being considered for certain jobs and other people being considered. And I knew that I had to leave. And also, which I always say, you're not going to make more money if you stay at the same company,
I
you know?
know. I
And
can tell everyone that firsthand for 20 years.
and I went to the New York Times and I remember getting a significant raise and the difference between like $10,000. And I said, I would like this. And the managing editor, who was not a fashion person at all, was like, is that going to make or break your decision? And I was so scared to say yes that I was like, well,
I know.
so many of us, because of this, and I don't know if it's because I was so like starstruck and grateful to be in this world. I think a lot of us didn't know how to negotiate better money or better thing.
Absolutely.
And yes, it had to break or make my decision because it was a huge difference for
But
me.
Karla, what they say, and it's famous at Vogue, a million girls would die for this job. I struggled with the same thing. You really had to be ready to leave if you wanted to ask for more money. I always skirted around it, like what you're just saying. I think because I was never at the point that I wanted to leave,
You're
but I
nervous.
know what I deserved. I was an editor and then a director, and I was starting with my assistant salary as I was getting promotion. So, but
Exactly.
I know exactly. We were scared, and that says a lot about us not valuing ourselves enough
Yes.
at that
And I
time.
think it was another time. I don't think it's a result of anything anyone there was
Exactly.
doing. I
No,
think
for
it's
sure.
another generation, you could say. So I would go to the Times and it was an amazing place to work. And I always used to say that I used to leave meetings and had to Google everyone they were talking about because I had
Mm.
no idea who Gaetano Pesce was at the time. Like, they were a household name for me. And Stefano was like this Italian man who knew everything about,
Everything.
he knew about so much. And I like to say that it was like the first of its kind in that lifestyle category. And then like brands went into it. I think he was really visionary in that sense. And he was a great boss and it was an amazing place to work. And I was there for 5 years. And then I got a call from Interview to work with Fabian Baron and Carl Templer. And Carl had worked for us at T. And I remember Stefano saying to me, or Alex Brown was like, Karla, you are going to work at a magazine with the expectations of Vogue and the budget of the school newspaper. And it was an amazing experience working for Fabian and Karl. I think that's where I learned more about
Hmm.
image making and stylists. But it was hard because it was a very small, reduced staff with very limited budget. At the times, you don't not pay someone. And you don't ask people to do things for a reduced rate. You pay them there. And this was just a very small budget with very massive productions. And
Wow.
Alex was right. And it was a great learning experience. You know, those things that you'll never forget. Phyllis said to me once, you only get to leave Vogue once. Do it for the right job. And she was
Wow.
100% right. And because I know when people get antsy and they want more and they want to grow and
Yep.
hold on and make sure. And I mean, I don't regret going to interview because I would have never met some of the amazing people I met, like Fabian, obviously, was a
Yeah,
genius.
you've met and worked with so many icons,
Yeah.
like
And
the top
Carl.
of the field.
Yeah. Michael Janssen, Marie-Amélie, Ludivine Poisblanc, who was one of the stylists. And those are experiences I would have never gotten had I not
Even
gone.
to have them know who you are
Yeah.
is valuable, invaluable.
Exactly. And so then after that, Stefano called me and he's, I'm going to W and do you want to come? And I was like, absolutely. And Carl was like, I knew you were going to go the minute they announced it. And good for you. And I was there for 5 years. And I remember Edward came and I
Yeah,
was so
it was
scared
that was
Edward
the
was going to fire me because you know how Edward can be like cold at the beginning. And he had just come from Vogue and Alex Gonzalez brought him. And I think when we did his first shoot, he was like, okay, this girl's like passionate and, you know, it's
yeah. And listen, also, I've talked about it with several people, and it's an important thing for people to know is when there is a changeover or a new creative director or a new
things
editor in chief.
happen.
Yeah, and it's scary. Even Phyllis talks about when she worked for Grace Mirabella and Anna took over. She didn't know if she was going to be kept,
Yeah.
and that's what
Yeah.
happens.
I
And
think
it's
that's what,
relearning a new personality. You knew Stefano, who done such great work. I mean, I've been lucky to work with him on other projects when I've been freelancing, but very just sleek, sophisticated, elegant. So you knew how he worked, but now having a new creative director, a whole different personality. And luckily, you've worked with so many people, you adapt easily and you're conscious of the fact that it's not just the way you know how to do it. You have to be open to changing how you do it.
absolutely. And I remember my dad used to say, do you know, like, I think this is why I'll never forget. He used to say, like, you don't just automatically go in and all of a sudden get the Chanel bag. He's like, you work for that. And, you have your dinner and then you have your dessert. He's like, and you are like a young Latina woman. He's like, I was a young Mexican man that literally in one of his interviews, someone asked him if he was there to interview for like the carpentry job. And he was like, no, I'm here to interview for the doctor position. And he's like, it's going to happen to you. You have to almost work double as hard and prove yourself because people have a lot of misconceived notions about children of immigrants. And so I was like, you really do have to work a lot harder. No one has granted me this job. I've really worked for it. And I think that was really helpful. And it helped just navigating everything in my career. I also have Edward to thank because when I told him I was moving to Mexico, I said, don't say anything. I don't want anyone to know yet. I told him on Thursday and on Sunday, I had a call from the woman at Condé Nast in Mexico and was like, Jonathan told me that you're moving to Mexico. I had never in my life gotten a call from the head of the office because Jonathan, one of the owners of Condé Nast, called that. Like, I was like, oh my God.
And why were you planning on moving to
My
Mexico?
husband had gotten a job. We met in New York, and my husband is Mexican, grew up in Mexico City. And he was never one of those people that were like, oh, I'm coming to New York for 10 years and going back. It was never in his plan. He loved New York and didn't want to move, but a great opportunity came up. And he said to me, I'm not doing this unless you are 100% on board. You did not grow up in Mexico. I realize that you have a very big career here. And we're not doing this unless you're okay with it. And we made the decision together, and he's very pragmatic and respond. Thank
But
God.
that must have been hard because you
Yeah,
are now like so far up. You've been consistently working hard, slowly, position by position, getting to where you are, which is a big deal. A W is thriving at that time. My favorite covers were from that time period.
Yeah.
How did you come around to feel that, yes, now it's time to do what's best for my family?
It took a lot of consideration. I remember telling my mom, and she was like, I gave up everything to move to the US, and now you're moving to Mexico. I knew what it involved with him. And he also showed me on an Excel sheet, this will be our savings if this
Yeah,
happens. And he said, we can keep the apartment in New York. And I had also started a brand with a friend at the time,
which I loved.
which you were very helpful and supportive on. And God, I feel like we need a whole other
I
podcast.
know. I
Part of
still
our
have it. I
lives.
still wear those shirts.
Yeah.
I'm
And
telling
you're a
you.
swimwear company. So at the time I said, let's do it. And I remember making the decision. And then at the time I was wanting to get pregnant. And then I got pregnant that year. And I remember telling Lazaro Hernandez from Proenza, I said, I'm moving to Mexico. He's like, you're going to move to Mexico and be the editor-in-chief of Vogue Mexico. And I was like, God, I love that you like manifested this for me.
Wow.
At the time, there was a friend of mine was the editor-in-chief. And I never imagined she was going to leave because who leaves these jobs, right?
Right.
She also was married someone and moving to Colombia. So it worked out perfectly. It was like the cards were aligned.
Oh, yes.
And the job was not just given to me. I did interview for it. And funny note, after my twins were supposed to come on November 23rd, and they had emailed me in August saying, can you meet on November 23rd when our CEO comes from Spain? And I said, well, if I'm not giving birth, I'd be happy to meet you. And my girls arrived on November 6th. And the week before, November 23rd, they were in the ICU and like for 2 weeks, the NICU for 2 weeks because they were small. And they called and they were like, can you still meet on the 23rd? And I said, yes. And I like half zipped my skirt, put on like a big coat over, and literally went in
Wow.
postpartum 3 weeks after. And I had no idea what I was interviewing for because they didn't tell me. And
Did you know the editor in chief was leaving at the time?
oh,
Oh, wow.
I had
Okay.
no idea. So I was like, oh, maybe they're interviewing me for something else because Jonathan asked them to, because Edward had told Jonathan.
Right.
And in January, they offered me the job and they said, it's Vogue.
Wow.
Oh my God. And then just the way funny life works, I went in, signed my contract, and a month later, the job that my husband came for, the bank decided to close and they fired everyone.
Oh,
And
my
he was
God.
like, I would tell you we would go back to New York. He's like, but you just signed this contract and we're not going back. He actually ended up starting like a fund with some partners of his, and it ended up working out for the both of us. I don't know that I would have ever gotten that job in New York. I remember Hanya Yanagihara answering a question. She said, I didn't look like a Condé Nast editor. And I felt that. And, I don't know if it was a mix of not seeing it and my own insecurities, but it was really interesting to hear her say that.
Well, how did you do? You had newborns.
Yeah, it started 6 months after my girls were born.
Oh, my God.
That was crazy.
And you know what's funny? That's just the culture. Like I've always heard, I don't know if it's an urban legend, that Anna had her two children each on a Friday and then was in work on Monday. It's almost harder to work for women sometimes, the women that still do it. Like I did it. Why can't you do it? Like that's not an excuse.
Exactly. Exactly. I think in Mexico, it's the same as the US. You have 3 months. I think the expectations for us are high. I'm very lucky and blessed that I have a nanny that helped me. Also, my twins were born premature. So my husband's company had a paid nurse for us for almost a year.
Amazing.
Which is a huge blessing. And my mother lives close by now, not as far away as I would have been in New York. My mother-in-law also was a big support system. So
it takes a village.
Yeah, it takes a village.
True.
And like my friends always ask me, like, how do you travel? I'm like, I take early flights. I try and be efficient when I travel. My mom comes, my sister comes, my mother-in-law comes. We have a wonderful nanny that helps us. I think Mexico's also like very family oriented country. And it's not strange for your mom to move to this. My mom has
Right.
not because she has other grandchildren that need her.
But
But
you're a great role model for your daughters too. I think it's important
I
for
know, right?
girls to see working mothers.
I remember also Stefano Tonki's partner said to me, I said, how do you do it with all the travel and how do you explain? He's like, listen, I own a gallery. He's like, in the same way that Stefano runs a magazine, and you want to go to a nice school, you want to buy nice things. It does not grow on trees. I think it's important to explain that to them. Someone was asking me, you travel? And I'm saying, yeah, but I rarely go away with my friends and say, I'm going to take this weekend to go with my friends because I travel so much for work. So
Right.
something you have to sacrifice something. I feel like as you do too, it's quality versus quantity,
Exactly.
right?
And then becoming editor in chief. Nowadays, more fashion editors are moving into the editor in chief position. But 10 years ago, you were more likely to have an editor in chief that was a writer than a stylist.
Right,
So,
like an Alexander Schulman. I thought that because I came from like the market positions that I never would be considered, right? Because if you think about it, like Christina O'Neill, like Kate Betts, like all those women were writers and journalists, and that
mhm.
wasn't my background. And so now I surround myself with people who are.
Right. And then
And
Stefano and your time at T, I would think was very valuable in the position you are now because you have to know more. You're overlooking the entire magazine, every section. It's not all
yeah,
fashion. There's
yeah,
profiles, there's news
there's
pieces.
beauty, there's health, and what people are consuming changes constantly. We had an amazing article that I think Choma and Chloe covered in the podcast about protein. It was like the number one. One of the girls from my office wrote an article about four signs you're not eating enough protein. It has more than 1.65 million views, Vogue globally.
Oh my God.
People don't just come to Vogue for how to wear 5 sandals, what this person's wearing. It's really a world. And I think we're talking about wellness, we're talking about beauty and food and where
Political things. Yeah.
exactly. We don't do political things here in Mexico because it's more complicated, but I really respect that the US is able to, and the way they do it is, I think, done so well. And as someone that is American and Mexican, it's relevant to me. So that I find just so interesting. And as we were speaking of earlier, just the global celebrities and what that means now, right? And
Mhm.
how it's changed since I started at the magazine.
Yeah, tell us about that. But before that, I want to ask, as an editor in chief, you've worked for various editor in chiefs. Are there things that you take from how a Stefano, or you can even say an Edward, because that was his step right before editor in chief, or Anna, things that you emulate in this top position, things that maybe you do differently,
Right.
or sometimes you learn what not to do from working with someone?
I think I actually have to say, every place I've worked, I've learned something. Anna's obviously very decisive, very quick. She doesn't want to have a 15-minute meeting of nothing. It's like direct,
Hmm.
land the plane, and when people present things to you, make sure it's with conviction and something that they're passionate about. I think with Stefano is just a lot of how the design world molds into fashion now more than ever before. And even you could say Fabian was the editor in chief of Interview, and just like how his approach to fashion imagery and his approach pairing certain photographers with stylists. And Edward also says this one thing from Anna is that you aren't too busy to answer an email. And
Mm.
it drives me insane when I get a follow-up email from someone on my team that they've emailed 2 days before and no one has even bothered to write received. Thank you very much. We'll look
Yes.
into it.
I told all my assistants, you don't have to answer right away, but acknowledge you received it so I can move on. That's all I
Exactly.
need. Because
Exactly.
Anna wants an answer right away. I'd go into her office, she'd ask me to do something. By the time I got to my desk, I'd get a call. Any news? I'm like, I just
I
walked.
just sat down. Yeah.
But it changes
Or-
how you think. Sometimes patience and taking a beat is the best option, but otherwise, yeah, what are you waiting for? Just do it.
yeah, exactly. And I think just that sense of operation, no time wasting, get things done, right? And something that drives me crazy, and I don't know if it drives you crazy, is when someone emails you. And in Mexico, it's also culturally different than the US. Everyone has your phone number and everyone's WhatsApping you. And I still like email. I like to keep things like, you
Yes.
know, scheduling stories. Like I can't discuss a story over WhatsApp. It's just not happening.
And with WhatsApp, you miss messages. If someone
Exactly.
replies and then someone else says something you won't see.
Yeah. So I try and keep it very organized on email, but when someone emails you and then writes you on DM, I emailed you, you haven't written me back. And you're like, really? You know,
It's like, let's stick to one mode of
let's stick
communication.
to one mode and just
It's too much.
give me a moment. I don't like to discuss work things over DM for sure. I feel like
Right.
that's something that's kind of like a rule that people have that I know. But yeah, I think for sure that I've been so lucky to have worked for people that have taught me so much about everything and also about how to balance. I don't really say it's impossible work-life balance but all of the women that I worked for were mothers, they were wives, they were friends, and they somehow managed.
Yeah. And I just feel like we're lucky in a way because what we do, we love so much. So when I think personal work, it's kind of the same because it's our life. You know, one bleeds into the other all the time. And I really felt my days at Vogue that you all were my family.
Yeah,
It's really
absolutely.
strange. It was like I've called Anna mom before and she wasn't in the room, but everyone's like, you called her mom. But I loved going to work. I would think about work Sundays. It never felt like work. Yes, it was stressful, but I was inspired every day. Every day was something different. So it must be like that for you because you're seeing everything and putting it all together. But I know we are going long and it's your Sunday with the kids. But if there's anything else you wanted to say about the magazine to anyone out there, your vision and maybe how you changed it or how you want people to receive it. And it's an important magazine. And I
Yeah,
love that I'm seeing it a lot more since you've
thank
been there.
you. Well, I think one of the most important things to note is that we put the first Indigenous woman on the cover of Vogue in the world, basically. And I think that is important because I don't know if you've been here, but culturally, we're a society that very much looks outwards. Like we like things that come from Europe, we like things that come from the US. So beauty standards were always European beauty standards. It was always a foreign model that did better. It was always a blonde actress that was the leading protagonist in a movie. It was never someone with brown skin or an Indigenous woman. And if the Indigenous woman did have a role, it was not a very important one. And I feel like in 2019, when Alfonso Cuarón put Yalitza as a leading woman, I will say that one of the editors pitched it to me and I said, oh, I can't put Yalitza on the cover. No one knows who she is. Like, can you imagine going to Anna being like, Rooney Mara needs to be on the cover, but no one knows who she is. And
Right.
I saw the movie and I was like, no, 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 we absolutely have to do this. And I went to New York and I was speaking to another editor that said to me, oh, you never put her on the cover. And I kind of was taken aback and I said, why is she saying that? And I knew why she was saying it. She was like brown indigenous
And
woman,
she's tiny and yeah.
tiny and I was like, you know what? I need to put her on the cover after this comment. And it changed the way we covered fashion, the way Vogue was perceived, the way that the fashion industry and beauty industry in Mexico hired people to be their spokespeople. It was always someone from away. And then Head and Shoulders was like, no, 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 this is going to be our image because she has long, beautiful hair.
Oh, yes.
And ever since then, I feel like it's always been so important to me in this like age where like the word DEI is a bad word. It's silly because DEI, people that are in wheelchairs and having proper representation for women who work and need a room for lactation, for God's sakes, you know?
Right. And I remember that cover that you did. We did something with her for the award ceremony and photographed her. And I was so excited when I saw that cover that you did because it was spot on. It was so powerful. And I know you did other things with her. There was an event, and you've just been so supportive of her. And I'm sure that just blew her mind to have a Vogue cover. She probably never thought she could dream to have that. And I felt that way even with some of the international covers I work with. Aiza Gonzalez is a friend of mine. I love her. I fought very hard to get her inside my last Vogue cover, the global one. I absolutely loved the cover you guys did, but I haven't been able to get her a cover in Asia. They say they don't know her there, but they don't know the region even.
Right.
So that's been hard for me.
Yeah, it's hard. I felt that I have a responsibility. There's so many young Latino talents in the region, and they're not getting a cover in Asia. So where else were they going to get a cover? Vogue Mexico. And I feel like that's important. And I feel like even women like Carol G, for example, that we shot on the cover 2 years ago, her sister was always like, thank you so much, because before so many designers would like not even answer my email to borrow clothes. And like now they're realizing the importance. Like Marc Jacobs took her to the Met last year, and bravo to designers like Mark and Jonathan Anderson at Loewe that invited her to the show. Because if I tell you another conversation, how many brands would say this talent isn't approved, this so-and-so isn't approved, to all the Latinas that we've shot over the years?
Even for the cover?
Yes, I could write a book. No, this person isn't approved, this person that, and I think now,
I didn't know they had that power to send clothes or
brands
not.
even ask who the model is. And if they don't like the model, it's kind of this whole thing of like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Because how do you get your break when you're not getting a break? Because it works about everything.
I know. Something like that happened with Katy Perry when I was really trying to get her in Vogue. I really wanted her on the cover, and we had a conversation where, I don't know if I said this to her publicist or her stylist, Johnny, at the time, but she doesn't need a cover of Vogue. She is fantastic, but she doesn't need it to make her more fabulous, to make her a better singer, none of that. But if she wants it, I'll tell you what she has to do. And what I had to do is be able to find a picture of her to show Anna where she didn't have green hair and where she was in fashion. But Johnny said no one would lend her clothes. So I was able to figure out a Vogue.com story to do with her. She was singing at the Obama inauguration. So great opportunity to feature her, do a diary of that day. But we couldn't get clothes for her to wear. But because it was a Vogue feature, Rodarte lent her clothes for the inauguration. Then we had a piece, her looking super chic in Rodarte. I showed that to Anna, and I was able to get her a cover from that. The hoops and the strategy to get her in the fashion, for Anna to see her in fashion, for her to look like a Vogue girl who deserves a cover.
Yeah, it's really interesting, like to see what it takes, right? When it's not just a performance.
Right.
That was 100%, I think, a performance. And I'm so glad that I honestly felt like if I'd done one important thing, I could say it's that, because it really changed people's perceptions of what beauty is,
Right.
And I think it's important to continue that work more than ever with models and designers and artists and everything.
Exactly. You talk about diplomacy, and I think diplomacy is your superpower. You credit your success and strong work ethic to Latinidad,
I think that, yeah.
or as she put it, that sense of family and togetherness. As Latins, we were taught to always respect the people older than you. That helped me tremendously in my career. That was a quote from you that I read.
Yeah, I think just that sense of taking care of your family always comes first. And I think, as you were saying, like our family becomes like the people that we work with and your friends that you surround yourself with. and your community, right? And
Mhm.
as my dad said, you're not going to like everyone you work with. They are not your friends, your bosses, and you're not going to like the way they treat you, but it's your job. People are tough and they're tough in different ways. And I think if you don't know how to handle those work situations that are difficult, you're going to have a hard time in life because curveballs come at you all day long.
Exactly. I love the quotes I found from you. So I was going to ask you what the advice you'd give to somebody starting out in the field, and you've given tons throughout our discussion today. But the quote I love that you said in an interview is, I still believe in hard work and the whole process of learning, whether it's at a magazine or somewhere else. Start at the bottom and see how everything gets done. It's important to be humble and learn from others and have a good attitude and be ready. So you just spoke about your attitude. You have put your money where your mouth is. You've done all the hard work. And I think that is a huge piece of advice for anyone out there. I don't know if there's anything you want to expand on it, but you've really given us so many nuggets of knowledge through talking
Uh,
today.
I think to surround yourself with different people that come from different backgrounds, especially here in Mexico, has been so helpful and such an important part of why we've been successful as a magazine. That I'll say for sure.
Amazing. I loved having you on. And at the end of each episode, I ask 7 rapid fire questions.
Yes.
They're the same for everyone. Okay. And it's just this or that. So, AM or PM?
Oh, AM, I think.
Uber or Subway?
Oh my God, in New York, the subway 100%.
Book or film?
Look,
Sweet or spicy?
sweet.
Spots or stripes?
Stripes.
Oh, I would have thought spots. Top or bottom?
Bottom.
Yay! That was Karen Mulligan's. The guys I've interviewed are always like, I'm not answering that. I'm like, it's top or bottom. What do you care about more? I mean, I'm always about the top because I wear the same bottom every day.
Yeah, I wear like a crew neck and stuff. So I always think about like jeans, skirts, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I love talking to you.
So much
Happy
too.
Sunday.
Okay, happy Sunday.
Bye. Okay, that's our show. Thanks for listening to Going Rogue. And be sure to like and subscribe. Today's show is produced by me and Maddie Rosenberg at Radio Free Rhinecliff with assistance from Maddie Kelly. Special thanks to David Vo for our great graphics and Taras Romanov for our epic theme music. See you next Friday.